E homa. Good to be here this morning. I've written my notes, and it's always reassuring when what Miriam speaks about at communion kind of ties in with what I'm speaking, and then what Gordy shares about ties in a bit as well. I'm going, okay, phew. Because there's always that little bit of pressure before you start, before you speak. You go, have I heard from God, and is what I'm sharing actually relevant? And then when you get these things that just line up, you go, oh, phew, okay. Because there's a bit of weight to bringing a message. This morning I want to go a little bit nautical, and I want to talk about keeping your hand on the tiller. Keeping our hand on the tiller. Now, this whole thought was born out of the message that, the past few months, what Pastor's been sharing from 2 Chronicles 7 and 14, that verse, if my people will humble themselves and pray, what Gordy was saying. Then I will see from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. And I just love the idea of us giving something to God, but then us actually being moving and doing something with it. It was also, as I was thinking of these ideas, I also heard a message from this guy, Tim Keller, who's a pastor over in New York City, and he spoke on some things. I mean, that's kind of what I've been wrestling with. So I'm going to share bits and pieces of all that this morning. But I'm going to start with a story. My wife and I, Chris, 4 years ago, we were off on a jet plane. Actually, about 4 years, almost exactly, we were over in Dubai, and we traveled around the world for 6 months. At the end of our travels, we ended up in Peru, which was pretty awesome, I must admit. And by then, we'd done a few different things, and we'd seen a few different dodgy bits and pieces. Like we thought we'd been kidnapped at one point. We were 100 meters away from a terrorist attack. Another point, we were a day late from another place to get another terrorist attack. Almost like everywhere we went, there were kind of things happening, but we were just out of the way of like the dangers of things. And so we thought, you know what could go wrong? Let's go to the Amazon jungle. And yeah, surely it'll be fine. And so Chris and I, we stayed in this place called Iquitos, in the middle of Peru, in the middle of the Amazon basin, and we were the only pale faces there, and it was awesome. It was so cool. The people were incredible. They were so genuine and loving. But it's fair to say health and safety was not like their top priority in Iquitos. So we really wanted to. One of the reasons we wanted to go to Peru was Chris was like, I'll go to Peru as long as we get to go see some sloths. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm down with that because I was just keen to go to Peru. And so we were in Iquitos and we jumped. We talked to this fella. I said, "Oh, do you mind how can we get there?" He said, "Oh, just book in with one of these people, and they'll jump in this boat, and then you can go down the Amazon River and see where they are." And so actually, I've got a picture of the boats that we went in. And I mean, those were actually quite nice, those ones. But you probably can't tell, but they were about like that wide. And at the back, they had some of them had motors, but some of the motors were a little bit temperamental, it's best to say. But we thought, you know what? We've survived terrorist attacks, kidnappings. It'd be fine. What more could go wrong? And so we went downstream on the Amazon River, second biggest river in the world. Great. And downstream, and we checked out these sloths, and it was pretty cool. Had this, just to show you how lax our guide was with health and safety. We took me into this cage with an anaconda. It was kind of cool. It was pretty cool. It was only a baby one, so it was probably only about that fat. And like maybe like from here to the speaker long. So it wasn't like a big one, but it was still plenty big enough. But he goes, "Do you want to pick it up?" I was like, "Oh, I'll give it a go." And just as I go to pick it up, he grabs it and just starts rubbing it like this, because they get the heat sensors, and then they just go, "Sss." Like, I'm about to pick up an anaconda, and you're trying to get to wrap it around me, and he's just laughing at this white dude like, "Ah!" So these are the same guys who we're trusting our lives with getting us back. It was a great day, and then they're like, we've been a little bit late. That'll be fine. We'll just do another little thing, and we'll go see another little, some more birds or whatever. And then we hit they go, okay, it's finally time to go back. It's starting to get a bit dark. And in the Amazon, there was things like weather can change relatively quickly. And I've got a picture of, you can kind of see in the background. So that was quite far away, and we started the trip back. And we're like, oh, that's quite a cool storm. Let's take a photo of that. And that was the last photo we took before we started to like panic, because that thing rolled in like so intense. And the river, that's really mild, but then it just started, like the waves was like, well, we're probably only about like waist height, but when you're in a boat that's like that wide and really long and quite tippy, and there's piranhas underneath you, you're a bit like, cool. Anyway, we counted to 10 once without seeing lightning and thunder. So you'd be like, boom, and you'd be like, 1, 2, 3, boom, boom. It was pretty full on. And our driver for the boat, on the way down, he was just cruising, but on the way back, you could see he was just, and we were thinking, if these guys who are chilled about like grabbing an anaconda and getting me like wrapped up by one, if they're starting to freak out, it's probably a good time just to pray, to be holy and to do all those things, that you're like, okay, God, if I go now, take me, and I'll be with you, all good. But I prefer not to. I think there's other things I've got left to do on this earth. And we eventually got there, but our guide was at the very front of the boat, and he was looking and he would call out if he could see anything, and we weren't sure if he was calling out for logs or alligators. He was like, yep, there's one there. And we're like, is it a log or an alligator? We just won't look. He just keep on going. And we eventually got home. After halfway through, we almost ran out of petrol, and he had to run off to the side he had to go off the side to the bush, and then just jumped over. And we're like, he's left us. And he came back, and he said, oh, I had no petrol left in my tank. So we were grateful they got petrol, and we got back. So when I was reading through a passage in the scriptures, and it starts talking about a storm on the water, that's where my mind goes straight away, and I start to think, okay, there's a bit of desperation going on. If you've got your Bible, I'd like you to turn to Acts 27. That's where we'll be reading out of today. And Paul goes through something similar to this. Now, he's not in the middle of a jungle, but he's in a really intense storm. He's a prisoner, and he's appealed to the different places that he could go and make his case in Rome, because he's a citizen. He's like, look, I've got rights, and I want to go there. But his real his ulterior motive was to go and spread the message of God in Rome. And before they take off on the ship, Paul goes, it's not a good idea, guys. There's a storm brewing. And they're like, no, we'll be fine. On the ship, they've got prisoners, they've got soldiers to look after the prisoners, and then they've got some sailors. Now, the sailors were experienced people who'd spend their lives at sea. And we're going to pick it up in verse 21, and it will be up on the screen. But if you've got your Bible, we'll read it along. Acts 27, verses 21 through to 32. It says this. So the storm had rolled in. They were freaking out. They were going, we're doomed. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. He is rubbing it in, eh? Don't you love that? Guy's like, I told you so. Some people say that he's like that. Other people say he's just stating the facts, which is probably true as well. But still, the facts hurt. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong and to whom I serve stood beside me and said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So God is going to come through. He's going to do this thing. Don't worry about it. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. On the 14th night, so we were there for maybe 2 hours, but after 14 nights of this gnarly storm, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, which is kind of it's in the Mediterranean, close to Italy. when about midnight the sailors sensed they were approaching land, they took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. Who knows who they prayed to? But, yeah. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboats down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away. It carries on. They do end up getting shipwrecked, but they all make it as was promised. However, as I read this, there is some contradicting parts to it. I'm not sure if you picked up on it. The first part, which I kind of emphasized, was God has said that we're going to make it to the other side, right? Yeah? But why would Paul say later on, unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved? Like God says, it's going to happen, but hold up. If these guys don't do it, it's not going to happen. Like, you'd think, if God says something's going to happen, isn't that enough? And I think sometimes we get stuck in that, like, oh, God says it's going to happen, it's fine. But is it wrong to think that maybe we need to do things in our own strength? We often live in an either-either world. Either God says it's going to happen, and so it's sweet, or we can do it in our own strength. God doesn't work like that. He's a both and. Yeah? Like, absolutely, it's going to happen, but you must do the mahi. You know what I mean? Like, this is a both and type of thing. Miriam was talking like, you can't give up. You've got to keep on going. God will do the work, but you've got to keep on going. I mean, that you got to keep your hand on that tiller. You've got to be willing to hold on even through those hard times. He works, but we work too. It's not us or God, but it's us and God. And there are heaps of examples of that throughout the Bible. In Exodus, we see Joseph, the story of Joseph, the guy whose dad loved him more than the other children. And that must have been really hard for him. I know what it's like when you're the favorite. Sorry, I'm just having a dig because every time Daniel's up here, he has a dig. But he was the favorite child, and he treated with favoritism. And with that, he probably didn't go around about it the best way, like sharing with his brothers and like, hey, by the way, have you checked out my new coat? Also, you're going to bow down to me and come at me. And he's the youngest as well at that time. So, you know, who here has a younger sibling? And if you have a younger sibling say that to you, you know what's going to happen, don't you? And so he takes care of business. His brothers take care of business, throw him down a well and do all this stuff. But throughout this time, it's almost like every time that Joseph tries to do something good, he gets slapped in the face and rejected. Like he's like, look, God spoke to me and he's telling his brothers, probably not the most tactful way. And then they're like, well, that's nice that you heard from God, but we're going to throw you in a well. And now we're going to sell you. And then he ends up in Egypt and he starts serving and doing really well in Potiphar's house. And then Potiphar's wife starts to, makes an accusation against him and he gets thrown in prison. And then in prison, he starts to help out there and he rises up the chain of command and helps people who are having dreams. And then they get released. One of them gets released, one of them gets killed. And before you know it, he's thinking, cool, they're going to tell them all about how God works through me. And they forget about it again. And so throughout this time, Joseph is going, look, God, like, why aren't you working in my life when I'm being faithful with what you've given? But God is working. He's just not working the way that Joseph thinks he's going to work. You know, we've got plan A's and we've got plan B's, and God has plan A's and plan B's as well. But chances are we've stuffed up God's plan A, and we've probably stuffed up his plan B and C, D, E. Like I know for me, I'm probably off the alphabet now. I'm numerical now. Like they don't have any more letters left. But God can still work with us no matter what part how much we fail. But we have to be willing to work with God. Does that make sense? Joseph had to be willing to work with God even though he went through those hard times. He had to be willing to say, no, I'm going to keep my hand on that tiller. Even though it's tough in the storm, I'm going to keep on going in that direction. And one thing he does say in the end of Genesis, chapter 50, Joseph, he reconciles with his brothers. His dad passes away and his brothers start to think, maybe he was just reconciling with us because Dad was around. And so they're getting a bit worried that he's going to take out some vengeance, do some brotherly kindness, as only a brother can. But he turns to them and says, in Genesis 50, verses 20, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what's now been done, the saving of many lives. Yeah? There are storms that we are in, and we may be thinking, people are trying to harm us, but God is doing good through that. Yeah? Paul, the author, the person who was talking about going through the storm, and when he's writing to the Romans, in chapter 8, verse 28, he says almost the exact same thing. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. God takes us through the storms, but he can do some good stuff out of it. But why does he take us through the storms? I'm a dreamer in more ways than one, but I at night I dream, and I can remember multiple dreams every night. I've just crazy things going on in my head. But about a couple of weeks ago, I had this dream, and I remember waking up and being like, oh, that makes sense. And I dreamed about weeding, pulling out weeds. Weird, eh? Really weird. Honestly, who dreams about pulling out weeds? This guy. But I was pulling out these different weeds, and as I was there, I pulled out one weed, and it had a taproot, which is just that straight one that just goes straight down like this. I think I've actually got a picture of them, some different weeds. You got that taproot that goes like that, and then you got the fibrous root system. Then I tried to pull out this other weed, and it's like, come on. And it was way harder to pull out. And eventually you got it out, and you can see, oh, this is the reason why it was stuck in there so well. And it started me thinking about those storms that we go through. If life was just plain sailing, and we end up getting from A to B exactly as we should, we end up going, cool, that's where we're at. But we can get removed much easier. When God takes us through the storms and we decide, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep on going down, because that's where the roots are going down to the nutrients. I'm going to still keep seeking God in those hard times, even though I'm going like this, getting pulled every which way. I'm going towards God. I'm being intentional about my growth. The purchase we have in the ground, or the grounding we have in our faith, is much stronger. Does that make sense? We have to know that we can make it to the end, even though we've got some hard things on the way. I've been reading this book called The Moral Imperative of School Leadership, and it talks about level 5 executive level type of leaders that you have, and the different qualities that they have. And one thing that they talked about, this guy Michael Fuller talked about the Stockdale paradox, which is a prisoner of war mentality. Now, they did a bit of research around people who had been prisoners of war, so people who had been held in concentration camps throughout different wars, like a range of them. And they were looking at what are the things that made them, I'm not going to say successful, because let's be honest, anyone in a concentration camp, that's not success. But what was them that they were able to come out the other side? And they found that there were two things that didn't work, and it was not an either or. It was a both and thing. The two things that they found that the people who came out the other side must have had was, you must maintain unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end. So these people that made it, they had to believe that no matter what happens, I will make it through in the end. I will see my friends, my family again, no matter what. But at the same time, I had to have the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of my current reality, whatever they may be. We have to be willing to say, I've got the faith to know that God is going to win in the end. This is all going to come out. I know it's going to be fine. But at the very moment, I'm struggling with this thing, and I've got to work my way through that. That's how we survive. That Stockdale paradox. You see, we are to keep on working, keep on pushing through. It's not to say that we have to earn our way to heaven. I just want to be really clear about that, and I think Marion shared that really well in communion this morning. We aren't to earn our way. Jesus is against earning, but Jesus was never against effort. Does that make sense? Like, Jesus does not want us to earn our way to heaven. We can't do things to make God love us more, but He wants to work through us, and we've actually got to do some mahi to get there. We've got to get to work, but when is it too much work? And this is something that I've struggled with over the years. When am I focusing too much on what I can do and not what God can do? And so I've come up with just 3 points for this part in particular. And this is something that I've identified in my own life. And my first thing that I came up with was, I know that I am trying to work too hard and not rely on God enough when my successes or what other people say about me motivate me more than what God, knowing that God's identity is, I'm His son. Am I motivated more by what other people say to me, or by what things can happen to me, or am I motivated by the fact that God says you're mine? I've got to check myself on this. The other thing that I find out that is a good reminder for me is, do I wake up? Or when I wake up, do I think about, is the first thing that I do spend time with God, or is the first thing I do spend time thinking, what can I do today to make today successful? I can tell you what, for me, the best thing I can do every morning to be successful is to make sure I spend that time with God. Every time that I do, I go, okay, now I'm at peace. Now I'm ready to go. But if I'm starting to go, okay, I'm going to get my feet on the floor and just start running straight away, I've got a really bad habit at that. Get up and check my emails. Get up and do this thing. Okay, I can get this done. Instead of going, hold up, let's get God first, and then I'm going to do some mahi. And the third thing is my prayer being a dialogue, or is it being a monologue? What I mean by that is, actually saw Tua posted something about this, is our prayer life is meant to be a dialogue, like a two-way thing, right? But I find sometimes when we're worrying about what we are doing too much, rather than hearing what God's doing, we just say, hey God, here's everything, I'm just going to download on you, and then I'm out, because I've got too much to do. Instead of going, hey God, this is what I've got, but I'm yours. What's going on? One thing that I've done for myself is I'm trying to think, how do I work through this? And I did this really silly practical thing for me. I drive to work myself in Hamilton every day. And I've just started doing this thing, and it just, for me it works, is I posture myself physically with one hand, not two hands, because I've got to keep driving. And I do it with my eyes open, so because I'm driving. But I take my hand off the wheel and I just put my hand up like this. And I mean, it's a silly little thing, but for me, all it's a symbol of going, you know what? What I have today, God, is yours. I know we've had like psychologists and stuff work with us because I teach with working with at-risk kids, and they talk about, you know, if you're ever feeling like pent up, you say if you put your hands up open like that, it actually is something that shifts you inside. But I do that for me in the car, and I go, okay, whatever I have today, God, it's yours. But then at the same time, I'm open to receive what He has as well. So in my head, I'm like, okay, this is a two-way thing. First thing I'm going to do, as I'm driving to work, I'm going to go, God, these things that I've got in my head that I'm thinking about, it's yours, and I'm ready to receive what you've got for me, because I want to be working with you. I don't want to just give up and go, you do everything. I want to be doing the mahi, but I need you to be in control. There's a little saying that I've heard many times, but I've heard it out of context many times as well. I do love the saying and the intention behind it. It's the saying, let go and let God. And there are some things for us to let go of and let God take control of. But I think a few people have used that as an excuse to almost let go of the things in their life and go, like you think of that tiller in the storm, just to go, okay, God, I'm done. You do it. That's not what it's about. It's not abdicating the responsibility that we have every day to step up and actually do something towards God. It's saying, God, I can't do it by myself, but I'm going to bring whatever I have and I'm going to work with you because what you've called me to do is bigger than what I can do. I'm going to let go of knowing that everything that I do falls on my shoulders, but I know it's what you can do through me, but I'm going to work with you. So I'm going to let go of some things, but I'm not going to let go of everything. I'm going to keep control, keep my hand on that tiller. I think sometimes we do that with the church as well. We think, okay, I'm just going to let go and see God move in the church. And we think church as in this kind of thing that's out there instead of seeing church as people with eyeballs and noses. Like you, me. We are the church. And we instead of seeing this big thing, we're going, no, this is who we are. This is the church. We need to do our part for God to work through us. So, Pastor's been sharing recently about if my people would humble themselves and pray, then God will hear from heaven. Actually, I'll read it. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. God will do this stuff, but he's going to do it through us, the church. Yesterday morning, I was going for a run. Don't think that I was being too holy. It was just because Piper was screaming and I needed to get her out of the house. I was the only way to get her asleep. But I was going for a run in the morning and I got this idea popped into my head. And when some ideas pop into my head, I'm just like, okay, that's got to be God because that's kind of smart. And people who know me are like, yeah, that's got to be God. Anyway. I think sometimes we look at the church and go, I wish God would do something in the church. I wish the church needs to do this. The church needs to do this. But have you ever looked in the mirror and got a shock at what you see? Like, have you ever looked in the mirror and been like, there's a bit of something in your teeth and going, ooh, I'm going to fix that. Or have you ever maybe not looked in the mirror for some time, and you probably have never experienced this because you're all beautiful, but every now and again you like look in the mirror and you go, oh sheesh, okay, maybe I got to go for a run, and you realize that there are certain things that you go, okay, I've got to actually deal with this. When we talk about the church doing something, my challenge is us. Let's put the mirror up, because we say, well, the church needs to do this. Hold up. You are the church. You need to do this. The church needs to go and reach the people that are into knitting. You are the church. You go reach the knitters, okay? The church needs to be a welcoming place. You are the church. You go welcome. I'm not going to say, God, you do everything and just sit back. God, you work through us, but we will work. We will put that mirror up and say, what is it that I can do? Am I going to abdicate my responsibility, or am I going to keep my hand on that tiller? So that's my challenge for us. Where are we at? You know, for me, I am so grateful that my Amazon tour guide, my driver, didn't go, oh, I give up. You go, God. Sheesh, we were going up the Amazon River. I want him full, I want those knuckles to be white. I want that scared look on his face because I know that he's taking it seriously. I want the guy at the front, pointing people out. I want them to be fully engaged with what's going on. In the storms, we want to be fully engaged. God wants us to be fully engaged so that we can navigate through those things. But sometimes we get laxed and we get a little bit disheartened and we go, I can't do it. But God's going, no, you've got the strength. Get up. You don't have to do it alone. I'm with you, but you have to do something. So do we need the encouragement? Are we feeling downcast? Are we feeling like, I can't do it? Ask God for help. But do something about it. Don't just say, God, it's all on you now. What are you going to do as well? What am I going to do? Because I'm the church. You're the church. And we need to move. Is that cool? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, let's give Andy a hand for that. Well done, Andy.